Okay, hi everybody, my name is Ian and I run Symtext. I'm delighted to be here this afternoon. So I'm going to be talking about the higher education perspective on technology and on textbooks, and talking about this from a particular perspective, which is this notion of creating one book from many. So in order for me to get through this for you effectively, I think I need to do a couple of things. The first of those is just to give you a quick background on how the higher education business really functions, and talk a little bit about emerging solutions, including what we do ourselves, and then I guess open things up for questions after Mark has completed his presentation. Okay, so we're starting from this notion of one book from many, and that begins to beg some obvious questions. If we can take one book from many, this means that we can actually chunk content from multiple sources. And I think it raises almost a philosophical question, which is, whose book are we actually talking about? If we can bring things from multiple sources and somebody's doing this work, well, where does the ownership lie? Not necessarily in a legal sense, but in terms of that sense of ownership. So let's talk about some of the characteristics then of higher education as an industry. And it is distinct, I think, in publishing for a few different, very important respects. The first of these is that the educator themselves, either say in a corporate setting or K-12 or higher education or whatever the case may be, they have the role as a specifier. And the specifier actually has to look at multiple publishers to find the best fit textbook in the sort of the current paradigm, and having selected content, they then recommend to their students that they go and buy that textbook. So if you're kind of following along here, there's two many-to-one relationships here, the educator to publishers and the educator to the students of their particular class. This is important because when we get into a world in which content is chunkable, in which it's more fluid than it is currently, then more influence and more control begins to accrue towards that educators. They begin to specify content in a different way than they're doing currently. So the second point here is the notion of credentials and the availability of information. If we can reduce the signal-to-noise ratio of accessing content, if we can make it available the way people want it, at the price that they're willing to pay for it, and we can do this in a more seamless fashion than we do currently, we can benefit everybody. The notion here, obviously, is that students, either in a corporate setting or in a higher education setting, are pursuing a credential. And in order to get that credential, they want to get as much value from that as possible. If they're paying for things that they don't want, that's obviously a detriment to acquiring that credential itself. So this, I think, leads us to what remains, I believe, the dominant problem in higher education today, and that is the notion of compromise. And let's dig into that a little bit more deeply. In talking to educators, and I've talked to hundreds of them now, you hear some very common things. And a lot of this revolves around, I've got the ideal course that exists between my ears, I know exactly what I want to teach, now I've got to go and find a best fit textbook to try and convey as closely as possible what I would like to teach. And oftentimes there is some tension, there's a disconnect there between what the prof wants to teach and what's available in terms of materials. And this can create some tension. And then obviously then, whoops, there we go. It obviously hits students in a particular way. We've come to call it the unread chapter tax, and it's just the extra cost that somebody ends up paying for materials that they don't utilize. This is not necessarily a terrible thing because education is not exactly in dire straits, but it is certainly a factor that needs to be considered. And I think from the publisher's point of view, it needs to be considered for the obvious reason that anybody in higher ed publishing knows well about. The secondary marketplace in higher education is absolutely leviathan. You've got a $10 billion business in North America all by itself. About a third of that business goes into the secondary market. So publishers' content is competing against itself, which is an interesting situation. Layer into that, personally, I'm a fan of open content. I think that if professors are trying to teach the ideal course, they need to be able to locate content regardless of whether it's fee-based or whether it's free. But from a publisher's perspective, it's yet another factor that's entering into the equation and determining what to produce and how many units are going to be sold and all the rest of it. So we've got, I think, issues facing all three constituents in the higher education marketplace. So the trick is, well, how do we solve that? And how does this one book from many concept slot into all of that? So really what we've got then is a brand new emerging world of digital higher education. We're seeing now a completely new set of behaviors and expectations. And clearly that's driven from music, it's driven from what's happened to newspapers. It's the same set of expectations that are affecting book publishing. And a lot of it's driven around what the specifier actually wants and what the students are beginning to demand. And if we find a way of meeting those requirements, we can make an awful lot of money. But if we don't, we could find ourselves in some kind of difficulty. So again, looping back from our earlier question here, we've got one book for many, and whose book are we really talking about here? Maybe we say that it's the educator's book because, again, of their increased influence, because they can now select content at a granular level in ways that they haven't been able to do it before. But really, is it really the educator's book? Perhaps we're talking about something a bit more embracing, a bit more collaborative between students, publishers, and professors. And frankly, from my perspective, as we begin to look at other sources of content, if we can chunk from text materials, we can clearly chunk from other sources or types of material like images and video and presentation materials. So maybe we're, in fact, beginning to redefine what the book is, at least in the higher education context. So this then is what we do. We spent a long time, as we were introduced, we launched our service back in September. We've been developing like mad for quite a long time. We've got some experience now. We've positioned our company around this kind of a notion. It's to find the way to make it easy for educators to provide their learners with exactly the right mix of digital learning materials. Solve that problem and do it to the betterment of educators, students, and publishers. And we've all got ourselves a very significant win because we can make everybody happy. So let's focus on the educator again just for another couple of minutes. If they're looking for exactly the right mix of content, what exactly does that mean? And it actually means far more than just getting them a few files so they can mess around. They need stuff that's multi-source. They need to be able to draw on chapters, cases, podcasts, videos, whatever from a variety of different sources. But the implication there is that the provider has actually attached prices and permissions to that content so that it can actually be used with permission. It has to be multi-format. We're discovering professors already now. So once the blinders are off, whatever term you want to use, and they suddenly realize that they can actually source stuff beyond text materials, we're getting all kinds of requests for audiovisual content. It happens very quickly because all of a sudden it's like the light goes on. They can say, I can teach a much better course, and some of it could actually be audiovisual. I can embed this within one integrated learning package. Again, this is just for Symtext perspective on how to solve this problem. We are agnostic with respect to whether content happens to be fee-based or whether it's free materials. Again, if the intention is to teach the best possible course, if we can get more material into the hands of more students, that can be a good thing. Educators need to be able to embed their own materials. That's one of those points that's becoming increasingly obvious. But embedding their own materials is not necessarily restricted to, oh, here's my course materials. That's certainly part of it. But annotations to third-party materials is an important thing. Embedding one's own research in there is an important thing. And certainly the discussion and the debate that we discovered takes place between students and educators is also important as well. All this has to be done by sourcing, editing, publishing, and consuming this content on a digital basis. But it goes without saying that some significant portion of the marketplace is still demanding content in print. So the process that we've come up with is to say, look, let's find those who opt to have a printed version, and then we'll work with a print-on-demand partner to fulfill those requirements. So there's actually kind of a green footprint kind of notion here. But basically what we're saying is it's a complete digital process until somebody optionally says they'd like to have something in print. Switzerland probably now is a little bit less cryptic a remark than it was a couple of seconds ago. But we can't sort of favor one publisher over another. The intention here is to satisfy the educator's need to teach the best possible course. So we have to create an environment in which they can select openly from a variety of different publishers and produce the best possible set of content. Now, publishers, obviously, and I know there are a lot of publishers in the room today, have a very specific set of requirements as well. And we've been working closely with publishers now for years. So we're very well aware of some of the requirements that are out there. A lot of it's based around the fear of loss of control of content. What happens to my business if my files get out there? And we've definitely worked to try to find resolutions to those through the way we've developed our product. But I think most importantly, the notion here is that you've got to be able to manage your content. If you're going to give it to a channel partner, you have to tell them what conditions they must satisfy in order for you to grant those files. So it can be prices per chapter. It can be permissions. This content can be available for higher education, but not to K-12, where this information can be made available to corporate training and development, but not higher ed, or in this nation or not in that nation. So we have to manage content on a jurisdictional basis. But we also have to do that, as I said, on a multi-market basis. So one object can be commercialized into a variety of different verticals in a particular country, But if we're saying we want content in Canada and in the US and Australia and India and everywhere else, we need to have specific permissions and pricing conditions that attach to each one of those ones. So from our standpoint, it was a key thing for us to develop and be able to offer to publishers. Some obvious points, reporting and decision-making kind of go hand in glove, don't they? If we can provide data back to rights holders to say, this is where your content is being consumed, this is the adoption rate, this is your royalty check, but beyond this, this is how your content is being read. Here are the time on chapter. Here's the number of students who bought the liquid textbook but who didn't consume your content or who did. These are the sorts of things that begin to create the feedback loop that I think aid decision-making in terms of how to publish, what channels to put that content through. The student perspective on this is actually fairly well understood as well. They obviously want to get the best possible credentials for the least money because this is what drives value up for them as much as possible. This does not mean selling content cheaply. It simply means providing the right content at the right time at a fair price, which I think is exactly the thing that we're all in fact after. Now, as I said, we launched back in September to great effect and really good response where we deployed the product. And Amanda Goldrick-Jones is an instructor at UBC. She runs a course with something in the order of 700 students. And she's definitely finding from that sample that the student response in terms of their engagement, in terms of their attention, was actually going up versus teaching the course using more traditional materials. So we think that we've found a way to actually satisfy everybody's interests. All right, so last point on the notion of how all this works. So we've talked about publisher material. We've talked about professors layering in their own annotations and their own research materials. But the third dimension to this is student participation. And this, I think, is an underutilized or underexploited opportunity, as students have an awful lot to say. When we deploy liquid textbooks and we've got content from 4 or 5 different rights holders and massive annotations coming forward from professors, the student response to this is to put in their own comments and their own stuff. And we're finding instructors discovering that some of the papers submitted to them are so strong, they want to actually embed them within the liquid textbook itself. In other words, to actually enhance or augment the underlying material with content that's coming through from students. So really what we're talking about then is a confluence of content from 3 different parties, from students themselves, from instructors, and from publishers. And every time that we use or create an instance of a liquid textbook, we're starting a brand new piece of content. Absolutely new every time it's utilized. And what that means is that the adoption rates for that content is very, very high because the utility of that content for the students in that class is very high. But for students outside that class, those annotations from that professor may not be all that meaningful, may not be all that useful. So the adoption is high in the class, but the pass-along effect is dramatically mitigated. All right. So this is what we do then. We let educators build the ideal course by allowing them to find exactly the right mix of digital instructional materials from a variety of sources, and then to provide this in a dynamic, interactive, engaging, experiential platform that drives up engagement and attention. Okay, so a couple of screenshots to quickly roll through here. I'm not sure how illuminating these few slides are going to be, but I'll do my best here. Educators need to harvest materials from a variety of different sources. So the first thing that we've done is to facilitate a mechanism so that they can go and grab files from a variety of different places by permission, of course. This material resides in their personal library. They then go through a process of saying, this is my course, this is the number of sessions during the term, these are the subjects that I want to cover. That's on the right-hand side here. And then what the educator then does is simply add items from the left into each of the sessions on the right-hand side. And by the time it's all said and done, they've crafted themselves a liquid textbook. And this process that you're looking at here takes minutes. It's taken what was previously a very painful, protracted, often up to 90-day process and reduced it down to moments. Once the information is published to students, and the typical access point to this is via the school's learning management system, or a typical process is to say, Ryerson has Blackboard. So what we've done is to write an API that connects to the Blackboard system. So when a student registers for a course, they come through to that particular course page and then are executed straight into the liquid textbook. They then hit our payment gateway and either pay via e-commerce or through other mechanisms, depending upon the particular circumstance. However, once they're actually in there, we're now within a collaborative environment where people can actually put in their own annotations and comments. And this is what we're trying to illustrate here with this particular screen grab. You can actually highlight tracts of text and attach specific annotations to it. And what we are finding is that sometimes the instructor will disagree with the underlying third-party content. And part of the value add is to bring a different perspective, not necessarily the right or wrong perspective, but just a different viewpoint on the same material. So it then goes without saying that if a professor does this one term for one course, that they'll very likely do the same thing with the same content the next course. So we have to version that content so the liquid textbook can evolve with each subsequent term. And as we gather enough data, we can begin to tell that educator how well each of their liquid textbooks is performing. Once they've taught one course this way, they're highly likely to teach another course using exactly the same mechanism. So this screen it's a grab to show you that there's a point where the educator can actually see a common view on all the courses that they teach. So we, as I said, launched back in September. It's gone extraordinarily well. The adoption rates have been high. The student response has been fantastic. Professors like it. And publisher support is actually gratifyingly strong. Frankly, we weren't sure. We had a number of professors back in about August giving us course outlines, and we had to then go through the process of acquiring the rights to fulfill those particular courses. So it was an unknown as to how strongly publishers would support it. But it was remarkable. We've had over 50 publishers now contribute content, at least on a one-off basis. They come from a variety of different walks of life from the publishing point of view. I've given you a couple of examples with the logos at the bottom of the page here. We've actually worked with Oxford University Press Canada and Laurier Press in Kitchener-Waterloo, and they've actually licensed the platform so that they can go through their own custom publishing program as a smaller, medium-sized publisher who don't have the IT budget to build these things themselves. The Harvard and MIT logos are there to illustrate that we've actually got some major global brand publishers now saying anything that's in our catalog, we love your channel, the Symtext, whatever's in our catalog, you're more than welcome to have. We'll give you the terms and the conditions under how it can be utilized, and then just let us know how it's going. And obviously the reporting behind that is very sophisticated, but it does show where the direction that we're leaning. Okay, so just to quickly wrap a couple things up then. So to make one book from many actually work, you need to satisfy the needs of multiple constituents. So we've got to satisfy what educators are requiring, what students need, and what publishers need. Drop the ball on any one of those three, and there's no business, and there is no one book from many. It's starting to think with a focus on the educator because of their influence in this particular sector. And our standpoint on all this is that we kind of have to be Switzerland. We can't favor one group over another. It's our job just to ease the distribution of content as much as we can. I know this is an obvious point. I kind of apologize for saying it, but new technology clearly mandates new models. The notion that we can simply transpose a print model to online and expect it to survive in the long term simply isn't workable. It may go for some period of time, but at a certain point in time, the change is going to take place. So the question is, well, how do we make this happen? How do we control content? How do we meet the needs of end users? How do we monetize this content properly? How do we build ourselves profitable businesses on a new medium? And lastly, whose book are we talking about? Well, I don't think I have a terribly insightful answer other than to say that if we are blending content from multiple sources and bring educators' perspective and students' perspective, it's a collaboration. And perhaps that, in fact, is the lens on how we should view content creation and publishing going forward. All right, that's my piece. If anybody wants to get a hold of me, there are my details. And thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I think Ian is approaching things from a fairly similar way to what we're doing, only we're approaching this from the consumer side. We're not yet launched, but we should be very, very soon. What I'm going to do is take you through a little bit of a demo here, because I don't think a lot of people here have seen what we're doing, just to give you a sense of how we're approaching the market. Let's see here. Okay. Hopefully this will go. The idea behind BookRiff is that it's, one way of thinking of it is it's an iTunes for print, or iTunes not really for print, really for all text. What we started out initially is with print, and this is sort of an empty icon of a book. It's open to consumers, anybody can come in. This particular Riff is private. You can buy between 48 and 8 pages initially for $5.49. We're integrated in with Ingram. This is going a little bit fast for me here. How do I? So it's important I explain, the $5.49 is the cost for a blank book. So you can think of the blank book as like a mobile device. And initially, that's what we're doing. We're integrating in with Ingram's and Lightning Source's API. So in effect, we're feeding funnels of PDFs into their print system and into their fulfillment system. So any consumer can come in and make a book in print format from any source of content anywhere. Now, the way that $5.49 is set up is that we charge a $3 fixed price and $2.49 is the cost of the print. And here you can see on the left, those are just riffs that I've already created. Those are books. They may not have been printed. They may just be private in my own format or in my own library. 4 ways of adding content to BookRiff. You can search from our database, and right now we have a database in BookRiff here of publisher content. So publishers can simply add their content at no cost in PDF format. You come in here, you put in a search term, you say, okay, I'm interested in that particular, in this case it's a chapter from a travel guidebook, but it could be anything. It could be a whole book, it can be part of a book. You say, okay, I'm interested in buying that. So you just click that piece of content. You notice it comes over here on the left. The left is in effect the table of contents of the book. So another source of content is Scholars Portal. We're doing a deal with Scholars Portal, which is the 21 Ontario universities, to provide this service to the students. So students can come in and go and make a riff, which is really just a collection of content, either print or digital, and make it themselves. They can go in and right away we have integration of basically all of the public domain content that they have available. And we have a number of other, in effect, channels of content that are coming through. That is, now you're seeing Wikipedia content. That's gone out using the Yahoo API. We pulled in the Yahoo content. You can, in effect, pull in any kind of content. Now, everybody's probably thinking, oh God, what about copyright here? And I'll explain that a little bit later. But we've now added 3, in effect, chapters or just chunks of content, and you can move them around, make them any way you want, and you can write your own content. So you can, first source is published content, either it's free or it's pay, and publishers set the price of the content they want. So we don't care what price they put on. If they want to give it away free, they can give it away free. If they want to put a high price on, they can put a high price. It's really a marketplace for content. Here, this is my own particular library of content. These are riffs that I've created. Maybe I want to add something from something I've already created. So I simply do that, add the piece of content here, and now I have 4 chapters. And the final way to add content here is to upload files from your own library. You may just have files or something you want to add or something you've saved. You simply add it to the riff. So we now have a full riff. It's a book. It's fully ready to go. If I press the Add to Cart button, it would go off to Lightning Source and it would be printed. Now, of course, here I'm adding in my own title. And initially, what we're doing is starting with templates of content or of covers, just to reduce the amount of moving parts in the book. But you can imagine that there's no reason that covers can't be content. There's no reason that designers can't add in covers to a book and say, okay, we want to add this, or publishers add their own particular version of a book. What we're trying to do is disaggregate the publishing process. Take it apart, let people choose the parts they want, let them take the content they want, put it together, and create books. Now, they're all private here right now, as you can see. But I'm going to I'll show you, right now, that particular book that I just created is processing. It probably takes a couple minutes to process. And this just shows you basically the same book, and you can see the preview percentage has been set there. So if you're a publisher and you don't want someone to look at your content, and you just set the limit, that's the public domain content that we grab from Scholars Portal, which in turn gets data feeds from many other public domain sources. Notice the book now, it's changed, it's public, right? Because what's happened is I happen to buy a piece of content. In this case, it's some content from a travel publisher called Hedonist Guides, and they just gave us a chapter just to play with. And so that's now public and it'll be available for someone else to buy. So you can create a riff which is a book or a collection of content, and that content could be just PDFs, or eventually it can be video and audio, it can be anything. A Riff is just a collection of content, and this is the one particular format. So this book now is available in the Browse Books section. Now I think what next I'm going to show you quickly here is just the process of making a book public. So when you make it public, you have to select the settings. And because every piece of content has to have a license, you can't, if it already comes from BookRiff, and I'll show you on a later book, if you have a book that has some content that comes through our channel, publisher provided it, and it already has a license. Or if it's public domain, it already comes with a public domain license. Or finally, if it's content that you've added yourself, you can't just steal someone's content and use us as an engine to print. You have to claim the content, you have to put up your credit card in order to do that. So this is the public consumer-facing side. So here's a book, I want to buy it. I simply go in and I can buy the book. So in effect, you've been able to create a book very quickly, reducing the process down to a very short period. The other thing we have here is a publisher channel. So if you are a publisher or an author or just anybody who wants to create some content, either privately or publicly, you can create your own channel. If you want to sell it, you can offer it that way. And here, I think is right at the end. I think we're going to show okay, there's an example of content. The first piece is from a publisher. It doesn't require a license. Second piece is public domain. And the final pieces there are content that require a license. So you actually have to go through the process of choosing the license in order to make it public. So that's the approach we're trying to take. Let me just, I think that's the end there of the demo. Let me tell you a little bit about BookRiff. And which button down here did you press to make it full screen? There, okay. So that is the end or the beginning? There we are. Okay. So what is BookRiff? BookRiff is a combination of two entities. D&M Publishers, which is a company that I bought about 3 years ago, is a traditional trade publisher. And what we wanted to do was use all of the expertise that we have in that company in a mature industry and combine it and make something interesting out of it. And what we did is we tied up with a group called Netobi. Netobi is a Vancouver application developer. They happen to be really good. We lucked into that, I think, in that they won the Web 2.0 Launchpad competition in San Francisco last year for an open source application called PhoneGap. And so the combination of these two, we don't understand technology, they don't really understand publishing, was what we thought would work, and it's worked so far. Now I've demoed, maybe 100 publishers now, and got very good reception, and everybody says, okay, as soon as you're ready to launch, we'll put the content up. The first major partner is Ingram, and they have been exceptionally supportive because, of course, they want to print these, but they can also see this as an opportunity for their publishers to offer content in a different way, in PDF format or potentially bundling. There's no reason why if someone buys a print book or decides they don't want the print Riff, they just want the PDF to view it on a tablet, or if they decide they want the EPUB, that we couldn't bundle the content, offer them a combination, whatever combo they want. And then we've also done a deal, and I think I mentioned before, with Scholars Portal. But Scholars Portal is interesting because they have an enormous database of commercial and public domain content. So we're starting with the public domain, but the idea will be that maybe we can create a network within the network so students can share the content from the commercial publishers within that network. There are no technical reasons other than time and money that we can do it, but they are very enthusiastic about this idea of working together and creating this network. But eventually, those publishers, there's no reason why they can't also offer that content to the wider public. So what is BookRiff? It's a browser application, so it's not native on a system. We think of it as a platform, not just an application. We want other developers to connect into us. It's available to anyone, anywhere. There's no password. You just come on. You can either set up an account or not. You create a Riff and buy it, or you can buy someone else's Riff. It's direct to consumer. I mean, the beauty of this for us is that there's no inventory. Everything is away. And we outsource virtually everything except the initial product and the platform. And we're a content aggregator. We're also a way that people discover content, and of course that is going to be a little bit challenging. We're small, not a lot of people know about us. How are you going to find content? Well, there are lots of different ways that we're thinking of doing that. One interesting way is a badge on the content itself. Now, Scholars Portal is interested in doing that, and we're working on another large consumer transaction where you discover a piece of content and there are many things you can do with it. One of them right now obviously is print, but you're printing on your own computer or your own printer. There's no reason that that Riffit badge couldn't pull that content into BookRiff and allow you to have it in BookRiff. The publisher of that content then gets paid. If I was a newspaper, I might think that would be nice. You get attribution if that's all you want, or you get the analytics about who those clients are. And we're obviously a platform for repackaging and repurposing. And we want to be a content accelerator. There's no reason that one book can't be 100 books. There can be, you can imagine Twilight as an example. You may not think of fiction as an area of this work, but you know, if you had Twilight fans creating their own versions, they can't change the book itself. They can only add to it. They can't change the edited part. They can make thousands, millions of copies of the same book, but they don't actually get printed, fortunately. We want it to create some disruption. We want this to be part of the conversation. We don't know where it's going to go. We've been saying this for nearly a year now. We're very close to launch, and we think we are within weeks of launch, but we want it to create conversation. We want it to take us in different directions. And again, it's for private or public use. So you can just create it privately. You don't have to let anybody see the riffs that you create. The biggest misconception is that we're POD. We're not just POD, and I think that's important to understand. It just happens to be the format that's 97% of the market now, or print is. So we want to deal with that, and as that market changes, we can adapt and also offer the ability to have the digital format or combinations of digital format. So you can have it on any device you want. And we want as much content as possible, and again, there's no cost to it, so publishers can simply add it. The one principle that we founded this on is the idea of choice in every respect. So everybody has the choice to do whatever they want. If authors want to offer their content, they can offer it for free or they can charge for it. And publishers can do the same, and you can add and choose any particular combination. That's really the most important part of it. We hope this is really simple. We've spent a lot of time trying to make it simple. I mean, that's probably one of the most difficult parts of making an app like this, is to make it consumer friendly and easy to use. And it's easy for creators to add content. We've developed an Adobe Air mass uploader. So if you're a publisher, you have 1,000 documents, you can add them all at once, let it chug away, adds the permissions if you've set global permissions for that content. So it's fairly easy. And again, open APIs. And everybody knows this, the no $9.99 ghetto. You choose the price. And I think that's an important principle. And I think this is it. The publishers keep 100% of the price they set on the print format, because as we launch, we're launching in print. And think back to what I was talking about in price. $3, we take $3 per printed book, then the cost of print, and then whatever the content costs. So a book could have no cost for the content inside, or it could be charged. The publishers or whoever provides the content keeps 100%. And I think that's consistent with what actually we're doing, which is a transaction. It doesn't matter whether we're selling a $100 book or a $5 book, we do exactly the same thing. Now, when we get into the digital, we'll have to charge a percentage, because a Riff may only have 25 cents worth of content. You can't, obviously, if you're going to let someone get a PDF, you can't charge them $3. for 25 cents worth of content. It may be free content, which we'll facilitate as well. And BookRiff is social. We want this to really support verticals. We have lots of verticals ourselves in our traditional business. One of them is the environment. We do a lot of publishing in the environment. We see a lot of opportunity for us to build stories and network around the environment to allow and engage our network to create riffs of content, of new ideas and collections of thought. And so what's next? We're launching very, very soon. We're in private beta right now, so you can get access if you want. Then it's just get feedback, and most of that will be Scholars Portal students initially. Add publisher content, expand sharing, so there's more collaboration, integrate with tools, allowing bundling, and then of course, white labeling BookRiff so that publishers could have that, or anybody could have parts of BookRiff on their site to use BookRiff to create mixes of their own content. And that's it. I'm really reluctant to give a date because, as our developers say, it's like a Rubik's Cube. If you can tell me when you can finish it, I can tell you when I can launch. And that's one of the reasons why Google doesn't put launch dates, because until you're ready, until you can satisfy the demand. For us, one of the big challenges right now, we had two challenges. One is permissions, making sure that is rock solid, and the other is being able to scale. We use Amazon's S3 to store all our data, but until we know we can satisfy the demand. So I would say in the next couple of weeks, we'll be working with Scholars Portal on quite an open basis. But if you want to go in and test it, you can. It's actually, everything you saw in there, I did. It wasn't vaporware. So I hope I sidestepped that well.
Right, well, it's kind of a chicken and the egg situation. Clearly, the more publishers we can sign up, the easier it is to convince more educators to utilize what we do. The only solution to get around that, as it stands, well, actually, we've revised our strategy, but that's a whole other conversation. So let's sort of keep it as sort of today's answer. Today's answer is that we get course outlines from professors. We take the outline and we immediately go back and approach the rights holder and say, it's for this course, it's this number of people, this is the duration, may we please have your prices and permissions for that? And the response to that has been really, really strong. From a critical path standpoint, from the time management, the platform is there and it works and it's fantastic, actually, I'm delighted. But from the time management standpoint, the time to get the permissions is an issue. We have found that there are some publishers, this is not a criticism, it's just life, some publishers don't have digital files. So there's issues around acquiring the actual material and then going through our conversion process to get it ready to go. So I would say if there's an impediment there, I think it just has more to do with familiarity than anything else.
I think one of the other impediments is frankly time for publishers. When we demo, and you probably find the same thing, you get it, it's a new idea, they like it, they're interested, and then, oh my God, I've got 8 other things I've got to do, and so it's a matter of trying to figure out where you want to spend your time. Yes, you'll get a report monthly that lists who it's been sold to, which ISBN, yeah, just like you would from any of your distributors.
And it is strictly,
and ours
sorry,
is, it falls into, we treat it as print, at least the initial part. So it fits in with all the licenses that you already have.
Just wanted to quickly throw in, it's a similar situation for us as well. When we launched, the requirement obviously is to take the price that each publisher set on their content, times the number of students who have purchased it, and remit some form of royalty. That's the standard way that we do it. We can do that through our e-commerce mechanism. We gather the money from the paying students and remit a royalty against that. We've also got circumstances where publishers have said, lovely, but we're not taking the risk. Here's our flat fee in order for you to deploy this content to this course. So we've gone down that road as well. So sometimes there are fixed payments that we're obligated to make, and we absorb the risk of whether we can sell enough units to make it worth our while. Or secondly, we'll go on a variable basis where we'll pay a fraction of the total receipts. So in other words, it's price set by publisher times adoption rate equals royalty. So yes, yes. 'Cause from our standpoint, it's a risk question, right? So we did a criminology course just starting in January that had some McGraw-Hill content in it, and McGraw's response was fantastic. Here's the content, but here's the fixed price that you must pay, and the other providers were all on a variable basis. So for us, it's a cash flow question. Sure, we'll pay it because we believe that we'll get the adoption rates. I probably wouldn't have done it in September because we didn't know how it was going to go. But the adoption rates were over 90%, so we were pretty secure in knowing that if we paid the money, we would get it back out again, which actually has proven to be the case. Yeah, no, it's a total mix. We've got professors who put cases into Symtext for which they've attached 0 price. But they would have conditions on it. The permission is, well, price is 0, permission is must be restricted to higher education. But we've also got academic publishers who have contributed content. That's where we've run into some of our stumbling blocks, is academic publishers who don't have digital files, but we certainly deal with them nonetheless. And commercial publishers as well. We've drawn in video material from TV Ontario. We've drawn in news articles from the Toronto Star or National Post. It's really a cross-section. Oh, I'm sorry. That's actually a very important point. Anything that somebody creates, including an educator's course outline, is in fact their intellectual property. So one of the notions that we've got here is the academic as a creator of content. So if they've got course materials that they'd like to distribute, it's up to them to attach prices if they want to, or various permissions. So from our standpoint, we're good to go in that as well.